There are mornings when you wake up not because of an alarm, but because of an unnameable emptiness. You stare at the ceiling, thinking nothing, but feeling no peace either. No one has criticized you. Nothing terrible has happened, and yet, inside, something is quietly slipping away a version of yourself you once believed was real. You wonder, when did I start living just to please others like this? And the answer is, the moment you began talking too much and stopped listening to yourself. We live in an era where silence has become unnatural. People share every step, every meal, every half-formed thought. Not because they seek connection, but because they fear being forgotten. And the more they speak, the further they drift from themselves. They trade away their inner world just to buy attention. They sacrifice depth for a passing glance. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The strong need not prove their strength, their presence alone is proof." And that is the heart of this journey. Silence is not about hiding. It is about building a life that does not require applause. In this video, we will explore 7 cold, clear principles of Stoic philosophy. Principles that will teach you how to focus your energy inward, how to stand firm in silence, and how to make others retreat without saying a single word. If you're tired of living for other people's eyes, this is where you return to yourself. 1. Craving silence, not applause. Today's world is no longer a place where living is enough. You must perform to be seen. Invisible eyes are always present, not to understand, but to judge, compare, and sometimes to consume you as an emotional product. You no longer live in your present, but are dragged around by the applause of others, a cheap yet addictive sound that fools you into believing its worth. People teach you to stand out, grab attention, never stay silent, as if silence itself is a sin in this century. But no one asks, what remains when the applause stops? What truly belongs to you when the spotlight fades? We live in an era where personal presence is no longer tied to inner depth, but to views, likes, and engagement rates. We shout online not to be heard, but to avoid being forgotten. But what's the price of always being present? A mind that's never alone. An ego that depends on others' validation. A soul that feels empty even in the crowd. And that's when we begin to realize we don't truly crave recognition, we've just been missing one thing. True silence from within. Silence is not the absence of sound, it's the absence of the need to prove. It is the space where you don't need to explain, to convince, or to display anything to be accepted. When Marcus Aurelius wrote Meditations, he never intended to publish it. That journal was the only place where he could exist without wearing the crown. In his solitude, he was no longer the ruler of Rome, but the ruler of himself. And you are no different. You don't need a loud world to be yourself. You just need to learn to step into silence where your ego no longer needs to be heard, only understood. We are poisoned by the expectation to react, to reply, to retaliate, to show up everywhere. But the wise always know. Real value doesn't lie in what you can do. It lies in what you choose not to do. People will always prefer someone loud because they're predictable, exploit, easy to swallow. But it's the ones who don't need to speak to prove themselves who make the world pause. Because silence is the language of power that doesn't perform. It is the realm where you don't need consensus because you've already made peace within. When you begin to crave silence, it means you've gone far enough in the journey of proving yourself to realize that all outside validation is borrowed. There comes a time when you no longer want to prove your success, you just want to preserve your peace. No longer want to stand out, you just want to stay whole. No longer need applause, you just need a quiet space to hear yourself breathe. And that's the sign you're returning. Returning from the long performance called living for approval. The world will not pause for you to find silence. You must withdraw deliberately. Be brave enough to reject meaningless conversations, invisible performances, and the need to show up in every gaze. Be calm enough to choose solitude over artificial noise. Be wise enough to know, when you no longer appear, people don't forget you, they finally begin to remember you, not because you impressed them, but because you forced them to confront the void you left behind. We don't need many to listen. We just need ourselves to listen. And to do that, you must be silent. Not the passive silence of the resigned, but the active silence of someone who understands. You don't need applause to prove anything. You just need a foundation strong enough to stand even in the dark, even when no one is watching. Because in the end, only one kind of person lasts, not the one most praised, but the one most peaceful amid praise. 2. Act like no one cares because no one cares. We grow up under the illusion that someone is always watching us, judging us, even determining our worth through every action. That fear runs so deep that many stop living by instinct and begin living as if on a stage that never closes its curtain. They weigh every word, edit every behavior, calculate every choice, not because they want to, but because they believe someone out there is watching. But the truth is, no one cares as much as you think. No one spends as much time thinking about you as you imagine. And it's only when you truly feel that truth that you begin to be free. A bruised ego always wants attention, but deep maturity begins when you realize you are just a nameless part of this world. You are not the center, and you don't need to be. No one tracks your every step like you believe. No one replays your mistakes for hours in their heads. They're too busy wrestling with their own insecurities. And knowing this doesn't diminish you, it liberates you. It frees you from performance, frees you from the burden of always being right, always being impressive, always being liked. It frees you to act without approval. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be one," he wasn't just urging you to stop persuading others. He was pointing to something deeper, that your transformation doesn't need someone else's belief to be valid, that your actions don't need to be seen to be worthy. A good deed, a right decision, a quiet step forward retains the same value, witnessed or not. It's in anonymity that the true nature of a person is revealed. Act like no one cares, because no one cares is the ultimate form of self-mastery. It's not bitterness or apathy. It's serenity, when you no longer need others' eyes to feel complete. When you still choose to hit the gym at 5 a.m., even if no one praises your discipline. When you still do good work, even if no one says thank you. When you say no to what's wrong, even if no one's watching. These acts may not make you stand out, but they make you real. And real is always worth more than impressive. There's a paradox. When you stop trying to impress, you actually begin to impress. When you stop living to please, you become harder to manipulate. When you stop fearing disapproval, you begin making better choices. Because you no longer ask, "What will they think?" You ask, "Do I believe this is right?" And that kind of conviction is what finally draws attention, but by then, you no longer need it to feel worthy. The modern world teaches you to show up, to make an impact, to never be forgotten. But Stoicism teaches something else. It doesn't teach you to be important, it teaches you not to be dependent. Not dependent on eyes, or opinions, or applause, or rejection. When you act like no one cares, you eliminate every pressure from what lies beyond your control. You return to the root, Do what is right because it is right, nothing more. Epictetus once said, "No one can harm you unless you allow it." But let's take it further. No one can validate you, complete you, or improve you just because they agree or applaud. The most meaningful action does not need to be recognized to be real. And if you keep waiting for approval to start living truthfully, you've all life over to someone else. How many times have you wanted to start something but hesitated for fear of being mocked? How many times did you want to change something but wondered, will people think I'm foolish? How many times have you delayed, haunted by the opinions of those who wouldn't even walk one step with you? The real question isn't, what will they think? It's, do you have the courage to be real, knowing that no one cares as much as you think? Because when you finally walk not for them, not to be seen, not to be praised, you begin to feel your own power. No applause? Fine. You still move forward. No recognition? Doesn't matter. You still do what's right. No one knows how hard it was for you. That's okay, because you know, and you are enough. That is the purest freedom a human being can ever have. When you stop acting to be remembered, you start creating what is worth remembering. When you stop living to be followed, you begin to truly live. Acting like no one cares is not a cold life, it is a reminder. You don't need an audience to live a meaningful we. And if someone finally does care, they will care for who you are, not for the performance you've exhausted yourself to maintain. 3. Guard your energy. Like blood, a misplaced flow will leave you drained. No one loses all their energy in a single moment. Just as the body doesn't bleed out from one fatal cut, but from many small, silent wounds no one notices. You don't burn out because of one major event. You burn out because small things drain you daily, meaningless conversations, people who don't value you, duties you no longer believe in, and thoughts you can no longer control. Energy isn't just physical strength. It is vitality, focus, and inspiration. Lose it, and you'll find yourself still breathing, still working, still walking, but no longer truly alive. We've grown used to spending energy like it's infinite. A reply sent out of obligation, an apology for something you didn't do, a meeting attended just to avoid saying no. Every time you say yes, while your inner voice screams no, you carve another cut into the flow of your energy. No blood is spilled, but your spirit fades. You don't collapse right away, but something wears down inside you piece by piece. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary?" That's not a question of productivity, it's a question of survival, because what destroys you isn't always evil, it's excess. Too many relationships, too many commitments, too many unprocessed emotions. You don't need to do everything. You need to do what's essential, because energy, if not managed like a vital resource, will be scattered across things that leave behind nothing but exhaustion. To guard your energy like blood, you must learn to identify the leaks. Who is draining you? What leaves you anxious after every interaction? Which tasks make you pretend to be someone you're not? What environment makes you wake up with nothing to look forward to? Misplaced energy doesn't create results, it only creates emptiness. It's the feeling of finishing a long day but not remembering what you actually did. It's a fatigue not born of work but of misdirection. Epictetus taught, "It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Every action requires energy to operate. Every word, every reaction, every interaction, it's all a cost you pay with your life force. And if you don't learn to allocate it deliberately, Don't be surprised when life feels like it's happening to you, a life where you're left with fragments of time and scraps of energy after giving the best of yourself away. Reflect on your day. How much time did you spend on things that truly nourished you? How many people did you talk to without wearing a mask? How many tasks did you complete for yourself, not just to maintain an image? If those numbers are too low, you're bleeding energy. And a body that loses blood won't go far. A mind that loses energy won't think deeply. A soul that loses its fire won't live truthfully. Guarding your energy means guarding your boundaries, not with loud rejections, but with quiet awareness. It's choosing to withdraw from judgmental conversations. It's turning off unnecessary notifications. It's no longer feeling obligated to explain yourself to everyone. It's learning to sit with yourself and feel whole. That's when your energy no longer fuels an image, but strengthens your core. Strong people aren't strong because they have limitless energy. They are strong because they protect their energy as a survival strategy. They're not everywhere. They don't react to every word. They're not present in every battle because they know not every battle is worth winning. Some battles only drain you until you have nothing left for what truly matters. You can't give your blood to just anyone, nor can you let your energy flow into places that don't nourish it. Commitment is, and you must learn to give it only to what's worthy. When you treat your energy like precious blood, you'll stop pouring it out to feed someone else's endless hunger. You'll stop trying to please every expectation. You'll stop running at the speed of the crowd. And then you'll lift your head and realize you still have the strength to go on. There is a kind of premature aging that doesn't come from time, but from enduring too long in drained relationships, suffocating routines, and hollow performances. If you find yourself exhausted every day, stop asking, "How can I get more energy?" and start asking, "Where is my energy leaking?" Because sometimes you don't need more. You just need to stop the loss. And then something strange happens. When you preserve energy for yourself, you begin to see what's real. Superficial connections fall away on their own. Things that once consumed you no longer seem worth a drop of blood. Simple things like a quiet morning, a good book, a deep thought start to fill you more than anything you ever chased. Energy is not something to give away unconsciously. It's something to invest with intention. And like any great investment, you need a strategy. You need principles. You need clarity to know where your blood should flow and where it must dry up. 4. Kill the mirror that reflects you, because it's just an illusion. You think you know who you are, but most of what you call me is merely a reflection shaped by other people's eyes. It's the version you've adjusted based on the crowd's reaction. A shadow built from expectations, judgments, and compliments. You smile when they want you to be cheerful. You stay silent when they expect you to be mild. You toughen up when they want to see strength. And eventually, you no longer know which feelings are real and which are survival instincts. You no longer know whether you're living or simply performing, skillfully maintaining an image for the mirror that watches you each day. That mirror could be social media, a strict father, a judgmental group, or an old wound that hasn't healed. It's not a physical object, it's a psychological construct. It's what stops you from living differently, thinking differently, trying or saying no. Because you know, once you break the image others have of you, they will react. They'll say you've changed. They'll make you feel guilty for daring to live more truthfully. We fear being disliked more than we fear losing ourselves. We'd rather remain agreeable than become authentic. But one day, you'll look in the mirror and realize the eyes staring back at you no longer hold any life. 5. Observe like a predator. Don't react like the weak. There's a kind of presence that doesn't make noise, yet always makes people wary. The kind of person who walks into a room without saying a word and still shifts the atmosphere. Not because they're aggressive, not because they dominate, but because they observe. They see everything with a calm, cutting clarity, without judgment, without haste. Yet nothing escapes their gaze. That is the power of the observer, not to react, but to read the field. Not to impress, but to perceive the essence of what's unfolding. Like a predator in the forest, it doesn't strike the moment it spots prey. It observes. It steps back. It holds its breath. And then, when the timing is precise, with a single lunge, everything ends. Modern people have lost the ability to observe because they're too busy reacting. They're dragged around by every word, every expression, every raised eyebrow. A single post online can ignite their anger. A comment is enough to break them down. A rumor makes them spring up in defense. They live like metal that sparks at the slightest touch. But a strong mind does not react that way. A mature soul doesn't allow emotion to take the lead. Strength is not reacting fast, it's being calm enough not to react at all. Epictetus said, "When someone injures you with words, know that it is your judgment of them that causes the pain." You don't have to nod at every opinion, nor do you have to strike back at every attack. You just need to observe and let things pass as they are. Observation gives you time to understand. Observation gives you distance to choose. Observation grants you autonomy, rather than letting you be dragged by fleeting emotions. And if you're patient enough to observe, you'll see things the loud never even notice. The weak always think that immediate action shows strength. But predators don't make noise. They don't speak before they bite. They make no announcements. Their silence signals focus. Their observation is the warning. And you should learn to be present like that. Walk into a room not to speak, but to sense. Not to perform, but to analyze. Not to impress, but to perceive what others haven't yet realized. In the most explosive moments, the wise choose to step back. Not because they're afraid, but because they know. Reactions made in anger are the cheapest kind. They lack depth. They lack strategy. They don't reveal truth, only echo past wounds. And the Stoic does not allow themselves to become a speaker for their pain. They choose to observe, to see what lies hidden. They choose silence to preserve control. They choose to slow down so they won't become predictable. You'll begin to notice one thing. Those who react quickly are often the easiest to control. Just one insult they explode. One provocation they lash out. One misunderstanding they rush to defend. And what does that mean? It means they've lost control of themselves. Others only need to push the right button and they're triggered. That's not strength. That's a trap disguised as being authentic. But in truth, uncontrolled reaction is the signature of an undisciplined, fragile mind. Meanwhile, the observer, the one who chooses their responses deliberately, is always in control. They don't get swept up in others' emotional waves. They don't jump into every argument. They don't get pulled by unreasonable demands. They guard their silence like sacred ground. And from that place, they act not quickly, but precisely. Not to retaliate, but to conclude. Not to prove, but to set boundaries. Those who react quickly feel triumphant for a moment. But the observer wins the entire journey. The reactive person often speaks what they don't truly mean. The observer only speaks what's essential. The reactive sees only the surface. The observer reads the deeper motives. And in a world full of manipulation, only the observer sees what's a real strike and what's a trap dressed as goodwill. You don't need to become a cold machine. But you do need to be someone who's not easily stirred. You need to learn how to stay still when everything around you starts to shake. You must develop a calm sharpness, like a predator in the dark, waiting for the moment. Because the less you react, the more you'll see. And the more you see, the better you'll choose. 6. You don't need to be known. You need to know yourself. We live in an age where everyone wants to be seen. An action without a photo feels as if it never happened. A thought left unshared feels as if it never existed. People no longer have the patience to live quietly because they fear being forgotten. But the true danger isn't that others don't know you. The real danger is that you don't know yourself, so you constantly need the world to confirm it for you. People often ask, "What do others think of me?" As if the answer could somehow change their worth. They adjust their behavior to please the crowd. They revise themselves like an unfinished project. Each compliment is a new layer of paint. Each like is a brick in the wall of self-worth. But when no one's watching, everything collapses. Because it wasn't built on a real foundation. It was built from external eyes that always shift. Eyes that have never been honest enough to define who you are. The one who knows themselves doesn't need to be known. Not because they disdain recognition, but because they don't rely on it to live. They know what keeps them grounded in the storm and what's just harmless wind. They don't live to impress. They live to understand every layer of their being, both the powerful and the dark parts. They don't need to react quickly, don't need to show up at the perfect time, don't need to be part of every conversation, because the most important thing has already happened within. They've realized who they are, and they are enough. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Dig deep within yourself. There is a wellspring inside you if you can find it. But you won't be able to go inward if you keep reaching outward for permission to exist." Knowing yourself is a lonely journey without spotlights, without an audience. It carries no title to boast, no certificate to prove. It only has one thing, the heavy silence when you stand alone and feel no fear. You don't need to be known, because being well known doesn't mean knowing oneself. But the one who knows themselves, even if no one knows their name, can still live with such peace that the world goes quiet in their presence. And one day you'll see, being known is chance. Knowing yourself is a choice. And that choice that is the mark of a truly free human being. 7. Don't tell your story. Live so others can't help but tell it. There is a kind of silence that stays with people forever. It's not the silence of someone with nothing to say, but the stillness of a life fully lived with no need for explanation. People love to tell stories about themselves, but the more they talk, the more they must construct a version, and the more they construct, the further they drift from who they truly are. The truth is, you don't have to tell anything. If you live rightly, your life itself becomes the story others can't ignore. We live in an era where words are inflated into achievements. A status update can be mistaken for action. A video clip can be mistaken for evidence. But what truly matters often happens in the dark. In the moment you choose not to react when provoked. In the moment you quietly rise from failure with a single complaint. In the quiet discipline when no one's watching. That is where a story of substance is formed. No need to tell. Just live rightly, truthfully, and without demanding to be seen. Those who live to tell stories often struggle with the present. They're too busy finding words for things they haven't fully lived. They take more pictures at the gym than they spend time feeling the pain of their muscles. They document every meal, every trip, every moment, afraid that without sharing, nothing will feel meaningful. But that obsession with proving themselves makes life thin, hollow, and lacking depth. They live like they're directing a film but forget to actually experience the life of the main character. Those who live so, others must tell their story, don't have time to worry about how they appear. They're too busy training their inner world, overcoming their own darkness, and holding steady when the world around them collapses. They let their life speak for them. They let their character shape their image. And when they walk away, their presence lingers. A person who once stood silently next to you, yet made you reflect on your own life. A person who never boasted, yet others speak of with quiet respect. That is the power of a story lived not told. Epictetus once said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Don't explain your way of life, be the living proof of it." A person doesn't need to talk about courage if they choose courage every day. A person doesn't need to lecture on discipline if their daily life is already the evidence. Presence, when powerful enough, creates its own narrative. No quotations needed, no reasoning, no declarations. The stories truly worth telling are often told behind your back when you're no longer in the room. Because that's when people stop performing, stop flattering, and what remains is real. And that reality either earns respect or forces people into silence out of shame. And if one day no one says anything about you, that's okay. Because the greatest story is not in someone else's memory. It's in your own gaze when you look into the mirror without flinching. It's in your chest where no one can see, but you know clearly that you didn't betray yourself. That is the quietest yet deepest reward of a life lived truthfully without ornament, without the need for recognition. Don't tell your story. Live in a way that your presence alone makes others question themselves. Walk so straight that even if no one follows, they can't deny your path is one worth walking. Let your silence echo louder than 1,000 words. And remember, storytellers may forget, but the one who lives authentically leaves behind a trace that cannot be erased. To preserve control, they choose to slow down so they won't become predictable. You'll begin to notice one thing: those who react quickly are often the easiest to control. Just one insult they explode. One provocation they lash out. One misunderstanding they rush to defend. And what does that mean? It means they've lost control of themselves. Others only need to push the right button and they're triggered. That's not strength. That's a trap disguised as being authentic. But in truth, uncontrolled reaction is the signature of an undisciplined, fragile mind. Meanwhile, the observer, the one who chooses their responses deliberately, is always in control. They don't get swept up in others' emotional waves. They don't jump into every argument. They don't get pulled by unreasonable demands.
Walk so straight that
they guard their silence like sacred ground. And from that place, they act not quickly, but precisely. Not to retaliate, but to conclude. Not to prove, but to set boundaries. Those who react quickly feel triumphant for a moment. But the observer wins the entire journey. Person often speaks what observer only speaks what's essential. The observer reads the deeper motives. And in a word, only the observer sees what's a real strike and what's a trap dressed as goodwill. You don't need to become a cold machine, but you do need to be someone who's not easily stirred. You need to learn how to stay still when everything around you starts to shake. You must develop a calm sharpness, like a predator in the dark, waiting for the moment. Because the less you react, the more you'll see. And the more you see, the better you'll choose. 6. You don't need to be known. You need to know yourself. We live in an age where everyone wants to be seen. An action without a photo feels as if it never happened. A thought left unshared feels as if it never existed. People no longer have the patience to live quietly because they fear being forgotten. But the true danger isn't that others don't know you. The real danger is that you don't know yourself, so you constantly need the world to confirm it for you. People often ask, "What do others think of me?" As if the answer could somehow change their worth. They adjust their behavior to please the crowd. They revise themselves like an unfinished project. Each compliment is a new layer of paint. Each like is a brick in the wall of self-worth. But when no one's watching, everything collapses. Because it wasn't built on a real foundation. It was built from external eyes that always shift. Eyes that have never been honest enough to define who you are. The one who knows themselves doesn't need to be known. Not because they disdain recognition, but because I used to be someone who constantly tried to craft a compelling story about myself. Not through words, but through calculated actions, through appearances staged at the right time, in the right place, under the right lighting. I believed that if I lived well enough, impressively enough, differently enough, the world would take notice. And if someone failed to see that, I felt disappointed. I didn't realize that the very desire to be seen was slowly pulling me away from the truth within. It wasn't until later, when all explanations lost their weight, when no one asked anymore, when every stage faded, and I was left alone in the dark, that I finally understood. Peace doesn't come from being understood, but from letting go of the need to be understood. You only need to know what you're doing and why. Everything else is just an echo. I no longer live to tell my story. I live so that the story is real enough, silent enough, and deep enough that if one day someone happens to mention me, it won't be because of what I said, but because of how I chose to live. If this video has touched something within you, a hidden corner long forgotten, a truth long buried, then please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss future content. Because the journey of growth isn't about loudly declaring that you are right, but about walking forward in silence, as if you never needed anyone to confirm it. Be someone who doesn't need to be remembered, but cannot be forgotten. See you in the next video.